Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September 17th, 2013 business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. We have a quorum of members present, so I will call the meeting to order. We'll start the meeting today with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. And in order to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to introduce Allie Jacobson, a fifth grade student at Greenbrier Elementary.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No federal laws addressing access to guns have passed since 20 children and 6 teachers were killed.
Thank you. Allie, would you like to introduce any guests that you brought with you today?
This is my dad, and that's my mom.
Hi, Mom and
This
Dad.
is Alan Jacobson, and that's Krista Jacobson, and this is my principal, Miss Scarsbury Price.
Very nice.
Welcome.
Would you
Thank you.
like to tell us about yourself, what you like to do, what your favorite subject is in school, what you do when you're not in school? What should we know about Allie?
I like math.
I like that, too.
We already scripted that.
And I like singing and dancing and playing school.
And playing school.
Does that mean you'd like to be a teacher one day?
Yes.
Very good.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Jacobson, for bringing her out. Thank you, Ms. Scarberry Price, for selecting her to come and help us start our meeting. It's always great when a student starts one of our meetings. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Any board members have any guests who are here that they'd like to introduce? Okay. We will move on to the approval of the agenda. For the information of the public, there was one item that was removed from the agenda that was published earlier, and that's consideration of the West City site layout. So absent that one being in the actual agenda, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Are there any amendments or discussion?
Mr. President, I'd like to offer an amendment to the consent agenda, which is located under new business, to sever contract for benefits consulting services, CBIZ, so it can be discussed separately and voted on separately.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Harshman.
It was
It
Harshman.
was Harshman. I saw you put your hand
I
up.
started to
Okay.
speak and her voice came out.
Got it. All right.
Scary.
Puppet Master.
So we'll move that to, if it's agreed to by the board, we'll move that to after the rest of the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that amendment? If not, all those in favor of Mrs. Brightman's amendment? Are there any opposed? Okay, the amendment passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. Back to the original motion on the approval of the agenda. Are there any other amendments or discussion? If not, the question's on the approval of the agenda as amended. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? All right. Agenda is approved, 7-0, and the student member concurs. Next, we have public comment. There's nobody who has signed up to speak prior to the meeting. I'm sorry. I just approved the agenda and I skipped an item. So approval of the minutes.
Mr. President, I would like to offer for board consideration minutes from the closed session on Tuesday, September the 3rd, 2013, and also minutes from the business meeting on the same date for adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Are there any amendments or discussion about them regarding the minutes? If not, the question's on their approval. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. Next is public comment. As I said, nobody has signed up to speak. Is there anybody in attendance who like the opportunity to speak at the meeting? Going once, going twice? All right. Next item then is item 1 under old business, the second reading and adoption of revised policy manual, section A policies.
Good afternoon. During the public business meeting conducted on September 3rd, 2013, a comprehensive report was provided that set forth the policy committee's proposed changes to Section A of the policy manual. The Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes and recommended that policy AEA be returned to the policy committee for further study. Since the first reading, the proposed changes were posted and members of the public were invited to submit comments. We have not received any comments regarding these proposed changes. The policy committee is requesting the Board of Education's approval of the second and final reading of the proposed changes. The policies in question are ABA, AGA, and there are recommendations for certain wording changes. And the second recommendation relates to policy AA, AB, AH, ABB, ABC, and AE that they be rescinded. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion to approve the second reading of the proposed policy changes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion regarding the policy changes? Mrs. Brighton?
ABA, when we're, excuse me, the first area that's in all blue, that was originally in policy AB, or was AB, I don't know if it's in the entirety. Does that not just repeat what we're already saying above that? For instance, in the second paragraph, all citizens will be encouraged to express opinions and educational concerns. And then we just say to keep the citizens regularly informed and lines of communication. Is there any way of maybe making this more concise, or was that possibly discussed in policy committee meeting?
You're referring to the second paragraph?
And that's just an example. It just, when I read the first, second, third, fourth paragraph, much of that from the original policy, and then we inserted following that, it looks like we just took policy AB and sort of put that after it. There seems to be a lot of repetition between those two, and I'm just curious what the committee, excuse me, committee may have felt a purpose was in repeating the verbiage. That's all.
What the policy committee did was look at all, there were three separate and distinct policies, combine those three, and I believe that they felt that they had provided a concise statement that was set forth in one policy. So I guess my sense is that they didn't perceive any redundancy.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments, Mrs. Williams?
I have a question and a suggestion for ABA. We're combining several policies here, and I'm wondering if any thought was given to using subheadings, perhaps student participation as one that addresses the student participation, and perhaps employees. And my thought is that using the search engine on the website, if you were to put in student participation with regard to participation in decision-making, you would likely get this, whereas if you just didn't know how to search, you may not arrive at the policy that you're looking for that would. Does that make sense?
I believe if you put that in, you would still get to this policy. However, I agree that there probably should be, I thought we had section headings, but I guess we forgot to put them in. Coming from the titles of those policies that we combined into
We
here.
certainly can do that.
You do that.
We can make a motion to amend to insert those headings. If somebody can make that motion to amend the policy and insert.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
I move that we insert 2 subheadings into this policy ABA. The first subheading being student participation, and the other employee participation.
And specify which locations.
Let's
Just so
see, it would
staff
be
is
the-
clear when they make the
Sure,
change.
it would be the, the second section that's in blue. Student participation would be above that, and the last blue paragraph, employee participation above that.
Okay, motion to amend by Mrs. Williams. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Clarification, Mrs. Williams, you said above the last paragraph.
I think.
I think
yeah.
it's above the 2 last paragraphs, isn't it?
Is it the 2 last?
In other words, wherever the words are inserted
There's
in
another page.
parentheses, where it says AB and then ABC over top of each of those.
I was thinking where it says the section immediately above previously appeared in policy ABC.
Right,
See,
that's
right
the
there?
title about students, but then the
Right.
next title would be where the next section, in parentheses, the black is.
Yes.
ABC.
Okay, because I believe you said above the last paragraph, and that's actually the next to last paragraph.
Next page.
So just for clarity, currently where it says the section immediately above in blue previously appeared in policy AB,
Yes,
that's where you would like to insert the heading that says,
student
Okay.
participation.
and where currently it says the section immediately above previously appeared in policy ABC would have a heading that now says
Employee participation.
employee participation.
Thank you.
Nope, just trying to make sure we're all on the same page. Are we indeed all on the same page with what's being proposed? Okay, excellent. Is there any further discussion? If not, the questions on Mrs. Williams' amendment to the policy. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. We return to the question of the policy as amended. Is there any further discussion? If not, motion is on the approval of the A section policies as revised for second read. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Trotman. Next on the agenda is the first item under new business, the consideration of the consent agenda.
Good evening, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and members of the board. Yes, there are 8 items on the agenda for your consideration this evening. As 2 weeks ago, I'm going to breeze through the reports fairly quickly and then provide some time for questions at the end. So do bear with me as I go through here. The first item on the agenda is the bid for kitchen equipment for the new administrative center. We had 5 contractors who submitted bids. Those prices include delivery and installation at the new administrative center this fall. Many of the existing equipment items within the facility needed to be replaced. That bid was evaluated on a line item basis for the most part and is recommended to be awarded to 3 companies. MTS Equipment of Winchester, Virginia, the recipient of 17 of those line items. Johnny's Restaurant and Hotel Service of Chambersburg for 7 line items, and Singer Equipment of Elverson, Pennsylvania. And the collective total of the combined award among those 3 companies is $136,889. The second item under consent are bids for the panel system furniture for the administrative center. As with the kitchen equipment, prices include delivery and installation. We expect delivery of these panel systems when the second floor of the facility is ready to receive those. We did have an opportunity during spec development to take a look at the system that's being recommended. Had the good fortune of having Dr. Wilcox personally be involved in reviewing some of the technical details of the different products that are available in the marketplace. And we're pleased to be recommending a local vendor, Hyperspace, we're operating formerly under the moniker of Office Suppliers Incorporated, for the steel case answer panel systems at a total cost of $231,404.54. We have three facilities bids also on the agenda. The first one is bid 2014-10. It's for the mechanical equipment installation at the administrative center. At an earlier board meeting, the board did authorize us to move forward and purchase the chillers, the cooling towers, and the outside makeup air handling units, and this contract will provide the installation services to make those things function and work in the new facility. The second bid are sprinkler systems for installation. The building is partially sprinklered, but this new contract will complete the sprinkling of all areas that are required to be sprinklered within the facility. And the third bid, 2014-12, for facilities is a server room and emergency power project. This work would provide the cooling equipment and modifications to the electrical system that are required for an IT hardware setup. So for those three bids, the first for mechanical systems installation is recommended to be awarded to M&M Welding of Gaithersburg, Maryland, at a total cost of $658,400. That's for the base bid plus alternate one. The second facilities bid, sprinkler systems installation, to Brewer and Company of Charleston, West Virginia, in the total amount of $790,000 for the base bid plus alternate two. And the server room and emergency power project to Ellsworth Electric of Hagerstown in the total amount of $259,500. We have three requisitions also on this consent agenda for your consideration. There are two orders for laptop computers to Hartford Computer Group utilizing the State of Maryland IT hardware contract. They total $46,800. There's a requisition for a truck for the maintenance department. The requisition is to Criswell Chevrolet in the amount of $36,120.60, and that contract would utilize a Montgomery County contract. And the last requisition under this consent packet is for an intercom and clock system for Pleasant Valley Elementary School to utilizing the Baltimore City contract in the total amount of $39,544, and the vendor is Commercial Cabling and Sound Incorporated. And that concludes the 8 consent items that are on the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I would move to award the bids or contracts or orders to the lowest responsive and responsible bidders for 2014-05 to 3 companies, MTS, Johnny's Restaurant, and Singer Equipment. Bid 2014-09, Hyperspace. Bid 2014-10, M&M Welding. Bid 2014-11, Brewer and Company. Bid 2014-12, Ellsworth Electric. And then laptop computers for 2 schools to Hartford Computer Group, Inc., truck for maintenance department, Criswell Chevrolet, intercom and clock system for Pleasant Valley Elementary, Commercial Cabling and Sound, Inc.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. You don't want to repeat all that? Mrs.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman, for reading them all in. It's helpful. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Fisher?
There's a significant increase in both the sprinkler system and the welding over what we had estimated. Am I correct? This is a result of the fire marshal's determination for some changes that need to be done with the sprinkler system?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question. Is somebody from facilities?
Not that we're aware of. It's just the marketplace we're in, and those are the prices that came in.
I think one of the things that I shared with them in the private session was the fact that the fire marshal, the new code requires the sprinkler system to go up through the stairwell.
Oh, okay. Well, there is a piece of it there that probably wasn't in the estimate. You're right. The standpipe system that's in the building had to be rerouted from where it is currently up through the stairwell system, so there is some additional cost there.
Thank you.
Was that the initial pipes that were on the one side, I think the one side or both sides, the original only goes to the first floor, correct?
Sprinkler system?
Yeah.
The current sprinkler system sprinkles a portion of the ground floor.
Ground floor.
Right. And then there's pipes that go up to old hose-type systems on every floor that are no longer adequate for...
Okay. So for that reason, we had to go through the stairwell.
That's correct.
And that included, again, some additional asbestos abatement along with everything else that goes along with it.
I know there was a lot of labor associated with that
Makes sense.
installation.
Sure.
My second question or comment has to do with when we do items, for instance, like the truck for the maintenance department. I believe we have piggybacked on another government, Montgomery County's contract for that. I understand that there is a significant savings in money from having to bid ourselves when we can piggyback with another government agency. So
That's particularly true for vehicles. We get great fleet pricing by being able to utilize some other districts' bids.
saves time, too, then.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or discussion? Not the questions. I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams?
Sorry, didn't get my hand up quick enough. I wanted to ask about the kitchen equipment for the administrative center. Is that it for kitchen equipment? There won't be any additional purchases necessary?
We believe this is an inclusive list of everything that's going to be needed for production, preparation, warewashing. There'll be some small wares to outfit. There were small wares left behind by the previous tenant, but we will have some small wares that we'll have to procure. Pans, ladles, spoons, those types of items. But in terms of large equipment, this is a complete list.
Thank you.
Any other
Well,
questions?
I'll also say we're recycling out of that facility, too, so we'll be getting a little bit of offsetting benefit by pulling out some of the old things.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No? If not, the questions on the approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Next on the agenda is a contract for benefits consulting services.
I did prepare a little summary of this report in anticipation of being under consent, so I'll go ahead and make some introductory remarks, and then Chris and I will attempt to answer any questions that you have. The current contract we have with CBIZ Benefits and Insurance Services expired on August 31st. CBIZ has proposed a 5-year replacement contract with all provisions of the former contract remaining unchanged except for the fee. They are asking for a 5% increase over the fee that we had agreed to in August of 2010. Their annual fee is $89,300. CBIZ personnel have worked with our benefits staff and our financial folks for many years, and they've assisted the Finance and Employee Benefits Department with a multitude of tasks related to employee insurance programs. And the list of some of the services and benefits we've received by working with CBIZ under this consultant contract are provided in the report that you have in front of you. And we've found the technical knowledge and quality and professionalism of CBIZ to have been exceptional. And I wanted to point out that CBIZ does provide benefits consulting services to our counterparts at the Washington County government, the city of Hagerstown, and some of the other Western Maryland agencies that we work with. That said, I'm here for any questions. Chris South is here at the table as well about this particular report.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Is there a motion to approve the contract with CBIZ for consulting services?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Brighton?
I'll start it off. I know that you made a statement down at the bottom of the report here that this contract that we're considering this evening with CBIZ is a different division from the that helped us with the 403B, but I was thinking this was the same group that wrote the RFP for the 403B. Can you help me distinguish which group and why we have it divided up that way? I wasn't aware of that.
It's actually two separate divisions of the corporation, of CBIZ Corporation. The group that we're proposing to, or the division that we're proposing to contract with here, provides us services related to medical, dental, vision, prescription drug, life insurance, health insurance, life insurance, LTD, accidental death and dismemberment, that sort of thing. They do nothing with this division that we're talking about this evening. Has nothing or does nothing for us with regard to the 403B and the 457. That's an entirely different division. That's their investment division.
So the investment division, do you recall what the cost of that contract is?
I believe that if my memory serves me, it's around $3,600 per quarter as a retainer, and to do quarterly due diligence, and then a fee for service for anything else. For example, if we would go out for an RFP or something like that for 403B services or 457 services, that would be on a fee for service basis, and time and materials basis.
And that's a separate contract?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would that be coming before us, or is it under the $50,000?
That certainly would be. I mean, we certainly could do that, and I think our practice of late
I was
has
thinking
been,
we had voted on that division. I don't remember voting on this divided last time. I remember voting on the same individuals because they were sitting with you last time that helped us and advised us on the 403B. So that's why I'm confused. All of a sudden, we have a separate division here. So maybe I missed something in translation.
I'll be honest, I do not recall who was with us the last three years ago when we came. But I believe that 3 years ago, we actually, on this contract, piggybacked on the city of Hagerstown's bid.
The one we're looking at.
The one we're
this
looking
evening.
at right now, yes, ma'am, because they had just bid those services, and this was definitely the best price, and CBIZ had been giving us good service, so we recommended continuation at that time. But I'm not to say that at some point in the past we did not sit here with all of those, because I do not recall. I apologize.
Okay. When you're looking at the bullet points, the list of services here, and again, you work with this every day, Mr. South, so I know you understand this in detail, so forgive me if I don't have that depth of knowledge, but when I look at some of these, I see what I think are duplications, For instance, providing actuarial services, the calculation of the OPEB or the other post-employment benefits, isn't that through the MABE pool? You know, that I thought the ARC was set by the state rather than CBIZ or another.
The ARC is an actuarial
Right.
calculated number, and
And
CBIZ
that's-
does that actuarial calculation for
Okay.
us. Through MABE, pardon me, we do the investment into.
The investment pool?
Into the trust is through the MABE OPEB trust.
Providing analysis on the legislative front, is that a duplication? We have our own internal lobbyist. We're members of the Lobbyist Coalition. MABE does legislative work. Is that a duplicate? I'm trying to figure out how to justify some expenses
What they do
here.
for us on the legislative front is more on the national level with health care and that sort of thing, as opposed to what some of our local folks do for us in Annapolis. So it's a little bit different.
So this is all federal legislation?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And of course, MABE does have a federal portion to their work as well. Then the periodic audit and review of plan design, and again, didn't we pay a vendor to help us audit 2 or 3 years ago to try to find policies that had individuals that possibly no longer qualified for coverage? And I've forgotten the amount, but we paid someone to do that audit and review other than CBIZ.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. That was an audit for individuals' qualifications as to whether or not they had the right to be on our plan based upon our plan document. What we're referring to here is the actual plan document itself, and keeping that plan document current with any changes that are made in the federal regulations and that sort of thing.
Okay, one other, just going on down here, future benefits of a wellness program. Is that through CBIZ or is that actually through our Blue Cross Blue Shield?
CBIZ is, actually Blue Cross Blue Shield, I believe it was $10,000 or $20,000 that they reserved in our contract with them that we consummated as a result of the RFP last fall. But what CBIZ is doing for us is helping us to look at options that we may have available to us to begin the program and to put into our program, and how to do a stepwise progression into that as more funds become available to do that program. But basically where Blue Cross is involved in it is merely from the funding aspect of having some dollars in the program to cover. We would bring to the board a wellness program for you to adopt, and it would be your own program, which may be different from another employer here in the area that also uses Care First.
Okay. And sort of to finish up here so some of my colleagues can ask questions. If CBIZ has been with us for 17 of the last 20 years, I've been on the board 6.5 years now, roughly. Why have we chosen not to go out and test the market in 17 years? It seems like due diligence would have encouraged us to go out there and see what else was on the market. And you're asking us to sign a contract or enter into a contract for a 5-year term. So that's another long chunk, another long commitment. And things are changing pretty rapidly, and I know there's a lot of other players out in the market. So,
Of those 17 years, we've only been back with CBIZ for 6 of those 17 years. There was about a 3-year period there where Bolton Partners, I think at that time they called themselves Bolton Offutt Donovan, did this type of work for us. And for several reasons, the board at that about 6 years ago chose to make a change. There were a few issues, and the board opted to make a change at that time, and went back to CBIZ at that time.
Mhm.
So we've only been with them
This,
For
for
this
this
time,
last,
th-
but
this last-
totally,
this last
we've been
span,
with them for
we've been-
17
yes,
years
ma'am.
in
Yes, ma'am,
total.
that's correct.
All right, thank you.
Are there other questions or discussion? I have a couple of my own. If I recall, our contracts with our employee groups call for 3 different types of health plans.
That's
right?
correct.
The PPO, the EPO. And at least one of those types of plans really is not, doesn't exist in the marketplace much anymore. We sort of got a anomaly where we've got a type of plan that most of the marketplace just doesn't support, to the point where we've had trouble finding people to bid on providing some of the services that our contracts say that we will provide.
That
Is
is
right?
correct. And CBIZ advised us when we went out with our bid the last time that we may have, that there was a possibility that we would have an issue
I-
with a
I understand that.
POS.
How did CBIZ let us get through our last round of negotiations without bringing that to the table?
I think it's a fairly recent event in the healthcare market that.
Within 2 years?
Beg your pardon?
Within the last 2 years?
Probably so, yes.
Okay. And to sort of follow up on Mrs. Brightman's question, do we do no testing of the market on this, for this go-round at all? I mean, do we get any quotes from other providers? I realize it's a professional services contract, so the procurement rules are a little different than a
No, we
regular
did not.
RFP, but we haven't gone and gotten any.
We did not. We felt that the fact that they had held their price for 3 years and now they were going to guarantee this price for 5 more years, if we took that 5% increase that they were asking for and spread it over the 8 years, we were only looking at about 0.6% per year. We felt that was a reasonable increase.
Reasonable compared to?
Based upon the fact that we had, it had been tested in the market 3 years ago by the city of Hagerstown.
Okay. I think we ought to have at least tested the market. I'm uncomfortable with signing a 5-year contract without at least checking what the market is. I still have concerns about the advice, and I know it's a different division, but it's the same company. The advice that they've given us on some of the retirement benefits, so I'm not prepared to support this contract at this time. Are there other comments from other members? Seeing none, the question's on the approval of the contract for benefits consulting services. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion fails 4-3. The student member concurs with the majority.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is consideration of the budget calendar. Mr. Sal?
Apologize.
No problem.
Sitting here for so long.
Back on the hot seat.
Good evening again, Mr. President, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board. The budget calendar provides important controls over the annual budget process. It sets deliverable dates and serves as a guide for the development of the budget for the subsequent fiscal year. Board regulation requires that the board adopt a budget calendar each year by October 15th to guide the board and its staff through the preparation process of the budget for the coming fiscal year. To that end, I am presenting you a proposed fiscal year 2015 general fund budget calendar for your consideration this evening. The proposed calendar was included in your board docs packet over the weekend, and I hope you've had an opportunity to review it. The calendar follows the same timeline that we used last year, and that is that the bulk of the process occurs between late January and late March. If you will, just let me highlight a few of important dates on this proposed budget calendar. First, January 21st is a critical date. We anticipate that we'll receive state aid estimates on or about this date. However, if these numbers are delayed or arrive a little bit later, the rest of the budget process will probably need to be tightened. In this regard, late January has become the norm for the receipt of the state aid numbers. This eliminates a lot of guesswork on the part of MSDE that sometimes resulted in large swings between the November iteration that we used to receive and the January calculations of the state aid. Unfortunately, it also limits the time that the board and its interested stakeholders have to consider the budget. What used to be a 3 or 4 month process now is condensed into a 2-month window. Second, I would point out that the calendar contains 3 opportunities for the board to have work sessions on the budget. These work sessions are scheduled for February 4th, February 18th, and March 18th. Of course, the board can add or detract from that number as they see fit and as needed. Third, the calendar once again combines the Budget Advocacy and Review Committee's report and the annual budget hearing on the same evening. This year, that joint format, which has seemed to work well in the past, falls on the 11th of March. Finally, the calendar provides for a joint meeting with the Board of County Commissioners on either the 25th of March or April 1st, depending upon the Commissioner's calendar, to discuss our budget. This joint meeting format has worked extremely well over the last 4 or 5 years. Members of the Finance Committee reviewed this calendar at their meeting on the 27th of August and have requested that staff bring it to the full board with their recommendation for approval. And as always, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. South. Is there a motion to approve the 2015 budget calendar?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion or comments? Mrs. Brighton?
A little bit off the calendar, but I think an important aspect of the budget process is the vision and mission process that we've started, and I was trying to figure out if the agenda committee or staff knew exactly at this point. I know we're going to start looking at that in October. A little bit of a concern because the vision and mission, if you look in our budget documents we get each year that we voted on, that's the first page in the budget document is the vision and mission and goals, because we've always felt that that drives the budget decisions and our priorities. So I'm just trying to figure out how alignment is the key word here, how we've aligned the vision and mission with the budget process, and is it too late to get the new vision and mission to influence the budget process?
Well, I think you've identified the quandary because the budget process is largely driven by statute, so that's not a process that we can change. We will have to, if that is in fact the case that the board wants the vision mission process completed, we'll have to accelerate that process slightly. As I sit here right now, I don't see that the board will craft a vision or mission that's so radically different that there's a fundamental shift in our budget allocation or our resources. But to that end, I think we can always modify the budget with the board's support.
At a
later date. We certainly can amend the budget either through the quarterly adjustment process or some other process.
Okay.
Is that fair, Mr. Sal?
Yes.
I think
All right.
Okay.
If you look at the first entry under September, and it seems like the terminology changed just a little bit as far as the deliverable. It says to determine each school's budget needs consistent with the master plan goals. In past years, we've actually worded it where, and I'm paraphrasing, but each school team reports out a budget need by school. Are we still using Are schools actually giving us their needs as we develop the budget, or are we developing it more here?
The schools normally funnel their needs through their instructional directors, who then bring it to the associate superintendent for instruction, who would be part of the budget team.
So it might look at a school site, the SIT team might get together, the principal, we're always talking about leadership teams at schools, and they know their schools best in their communities. So, but we take that recommendation, it's passed up through the supervisors, is that?
If there's a specific need at a school and the SIT team provides a recommendation to the principal would carry it to the various directors, whether it be Matt Semble or Rick Akers. They would pass it on through leadership, and we would take it. But as a matter of course, there really aren't a lot of those kinds of requests that are originating out of the schools at this time, although we do ask.
You do ask.
It's a part of the process each year.
I was just, okay. Just one small, and again, I don't know if it's that important, but under March 3/18/14, it says approve the FY 2015 budget. Should that say proposed budget at that point, or does it really matter one way or the other? It's usually the English teachers up here that make these distinctions, but I thought I'd get mine in this time.
And it would be the budget that would be proposed to the commissioners, yes.
So maybe put the word proposed in
certainly
there
can do
as
that.
we have in the past, and that would be it.
Is there a second? Or, I'm sorry, is there any other discussion?
I was just going to ask, so following it goes into the work session as the final draft budget and exits the work session as the proposed budget that we're taking to the commissioners. Is that right?
Is that?
It's the budget that is proposed to the commissioners, yes.
Is that right? I'm not sure that's right. I mean, and maybe I'm incorrect, but our budget is our budget. We'll make a request of the
and
commissioners.
that's why if you look on 319, it talks about the board-approved budget. It is a proposed budget to the commissioners, but it is a board-approved budget at that point, once the board approves that budget.
We're using the budget that we adopt to make a request of the commissioners, right? That they will either fund or not fund.
That's correct.
And then we will have to come back and adjust or amend our budget, but it is an approved budget at the point that we approve it.
Yes.
That's the way I understand it.
It's not the final one, like it says further down in like May to July and those areas. It's
Right.
just that we voted on it.
Approved it, but not voted on it.
But it is the final budget if the commissioners approve all of the funding that the board is requesting.
In other words, the commissioners can't reject our budget. They can
Just
reject the funding that they
of the
provide.
budget.
That's
And then
correct.
we have to decide
Then we'll
where
change
the
it.
priorities are
Right.
internally.
Right. So we make the change, not make the change?
Well, but I think what we're hearing on 318, it's a proposed budget. On 319, we actually vote on it, correct?
Okay.
Or not?
Actually, on 318, you vote on it.
We vote on it?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why we took the I mean,
Because we've had the word proposed in there in the past, so I thought there was a good reason
That's why we
for it to
removed
be
the
there.
word proposed this year.
Okay.
But if the board desires the word proposed in there, we certainly can put it back in.
I'm agnostic on that one.
Any other comments or questions? Questions on the approval of the 2015 budget calendar? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
There is no superintendent's report tonight, unless there's some late-breaking news that we...
No.
Next is personnel actions. Francisco.
Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board, we have for your consideration this evening several teacher staff changes as discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Ms. Francisco. Is there a motion to approve the personnel changes recommended by staff?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0, and the student member abstains.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Francisco. Next is reports to the board. The first item is a International Baccalaureate Diploma Program update. Mr. Akers?
Good afternoon, President Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox. We have with us this evening Mr. Kevin Jackson, who's the IB coordinator, and Mr. Dwayne McNairn, principal of North Hagerstown High School, and they're going to give us an overview of the IB program.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Our goal tonight is to give you a quick picture, so to speak, of the IB program at North Hagerstown High School. The IB mission is to develop programs of international education focusing on developing inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people. As a result, our students can be contributors in creating a more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. The IB currently works with over 3,500 schools in 144 countries and serves over 1 million students worldwide, and we're glad to be a part of that opportunity. It's a freshman college experience that requires students to take college-level course in all subject areas, including the 6 listed on the slide. Our goal at North High is to convince our students that they can not only meet but exceed the academic demands that will take them to their next level of learning, which they deserve.
By the way, thank you for letting us speak about this. This is very
thank you for
one of our
being
passions. The IB curriculum, this slide will demonstrate that, is definitely a student-centered curriculum. They started with the student and the attributes that every student should have, and it asked the teachers, the next ring from the middle are the teacher and the approaches to learning, and so that the teaching and the approaches to learning facilitate the awareness and the growth of those attributes within the students. And Mr. McNair will talk about the attributes here in a minute. The next ring is the Theory of Knowledge, the Extended Essay, and the CAS program. And those 3 programs help students bridge the gap into the curriculum itself, this well-rounded liberal arts education that they're going to get. The Theory of Knowledge course gets the students to think differently. It gets them to consider every aspect of a topic before making a decision. The Extended Essay allows them to do an independent research on a subject of their choice and demonstrate what they can do. The Creativity Action Service allows the student to be well-rounded not only in subject areas but also in the arts, which is the creativity part, physical activity, which is the action, and service, which is community service. Finally, the next ring to the outside of the whole program are the actual courses themselves. So with the courses being farthest away, but the students' impact, those courses' impact upon the students is what's most important, which creates the whole IB program.
I love these attributes and how the graphic shows them fitting together as a whole. I have to admit, 2 of my favorites up there are the risk takers and thinkers. There's a lot of research out there that shows that we all think, we all learn better when we step outside of our comfort zone. And the power is convincing a student that they're absolutely worthy of taking that risk, which I think is critical in today's education. As a result, we're creating opportunities for students to think for themselves, which I think, again, all these attributes together, I think are very powerful. As far as the application process, it's pretty straightforward. The application is submitted with 3 teacher recommendations. We look at various data, an interview, and a writing sample or a task. we use a variety of snapshots that allow us to make sure that the student's not only right for the program, but maybe the program is definitely right for the student as well. We want that to be a good experience for that student. The requirements, there are essentially 9 requirements, 3 higher level courses, 3 standard level courses, theory of knowledge course, CAS hours, and extended essay, along with all the core requirements for high school.
The IB requires students to take 3 higher level courses. Now, a higher level course would be a 2-year course, like the English class. They'll get Miss Jennifer and the English 11, and then they come back for English for part 2 at the 12th grade year. And the standard level is meant to be a 1-year course, but many of our courses are actually 2 years. For example, the foreign language. Foreign language students need to be able to read, write, and speak the language, so more time given for that is essential. IB's goal for foreign language B is what we're called, is that a student should be able to visit a country where that's the native language and move around the country without asking for assistance. So that's really what they're trying to do. So they're almost fluent. We also teach that at a higher level if the student is truly gifted in a particular language. The next 3 slides are just models of how a student might work through the program. Usually when a student decides that the IB is correct for them, we sit down sometime before the 9th grade year starts and we walk through a 4-year plan to show them how they might work through the program and still try to meet their individual needs. And sometimes, you know, we have some conversations, and it's always a growing document. It's a fluid document. It changes as the student interests change.
One thing I will add, I think that we continue to try to work very hard in being creative in our scheduling to try to meet the passions that students have. If we have a student has a passion for music or the arts, that we want to make sure that they have that opportunity as well, and to get all the other requirements as needed and try to work through with that with them on that. So sometimes that's not very clean and neat, but that's okay, because clean and neat doesn't always meet those, you know, get us where the student needs to be.
So our data slide, you know, we're trending up, that's for sure. The number of candidates for past year was down some, as you can see, but it was down because we anticipated the transition from the block schedule into a year-long schedule. So with our foreign language students, we held them off, so they only had part 1 as a junior, and they're currently taking part 2 right now, so they'll all test this year when they normally would have tested last year. So that's why that number, there's a discrepancy in that number. So, and where the subject area test, why that number is down as well.
And I guess to finish up, I think that from my standpoint as a principal, I'm all about supporting the IB program, but I'm all about supporting all the other students in the school as well. So from my vantage point, I'm looking at how can we continue to grow IB, and how can that, the training, the PD that comes out of for the teachers and the students get, how can that, you know, move over into the rest of the student body so that we can continue to grow those teaching aspects throughout the entire school.
So overall, the IB program is a nationally recognized, very prestigious program that we added here a few years ago. North High attracts students from across the county to attend that program. It continues to grow, and the number of kids participating seems to continue to grow, and their test scores, I think, reflect a truly rigorous program that's a great opportunity for our students. Are there any questions?
Mrs. Harshman?
I have just a couple questions. How many students are turned down each year when they apply, or they're...
How many are turned down yet? We don't actually turn students away. We wouldn't want to do that. What we do is we make recommendations. And we either recommend students for the program or we don't recommend based on the scores. And when we make that recommendation, we are telling students that, and their families, that, you know, you've shown a great work ethic, you showed motivation to do extra schoolwork, you're ready for the program. For students who we don't recommend, you know, it's based on a particular area, and if the parent wishes or the family wishes to say, yes, they can do this, then we challenge them to say, okay, go back to the 4-year plans. These are the courses we think you should take. When at the end of your freshman year, then reapply. Show us that this is what you can do, and then that recommendation will be there, and we've had several students who have actually done that. Or the parent can say, you know, we're right, and at that point, Mr. McNairn can make that decision about that child, and we would allow them to have that opportunity. And when that opportunity is to build to the IB program, which is going back to what Mr. McNairn was saying previously, that when students enter the IB, when they get to the 11th grade, they all just don't continue, but we build them as if they are going to. So, and the IB program is not for everyone, but we want to try to prepare as many kids as we can. And what happens is when they get to the point and all of a sudden, you know, it's not really my thing, but then they realize, you know, that AP course, I think I can do that now. I think I'm ready for that. And if you were to look at our AP IB numbers, North High before IB came, we were giving about 450 AP exams. After IB arrived, we were still giving 450 AP exams, but the IB kids were not in that mix. So as we prepared kids for the IB program, it lifted this whole segment of the population into some more rigorous courses. So it is a recommendation, and we were very honest with the parents why it's not a recommendation, and they can make that choice.
Okay, and I was wondering, you had said on the one slide where it shows a drop in the numbers.
Yes.
What was the reason for the drop?
All the previous years, all the juniors would have taken a test because they were in foreign language, Spanish, French, or German. In the block schedule, we gave them 2 blocks all year long, and they took the test at the end of their junior year. The change from a block schedule into the year-long schedule, that really wasn't realistic because of time. We could not give up 2 periods in 1 year for that. So we put 1 in the junior year, 1 in the senior year. So last year, all those students that sat in basically part 1 of Spanish, French, or German that would have tested did not, because they're going to test this year. So that's why that gap is there.
So they're not considered candidates even if
They're called anticipated candidates. So the candidates that are on the screen are only the ones who actually took a test.
are actually in
Yeah,
the...
there's 3 types of candidates. Diploma candidate, that's the senior who's going to do all 9 requirements. Anticipated is a junior who's anticipating doing all 9 requirements. And then the certificate, which now is called course, are students who are just taking a course or 2 or 3 or as many as they would like at that point.
Okay. And my last question is, you have a list, or I have a list, of universities that the students attended, and I was wondering how many of those have graduated? Do we have any info on that?
I would not know. This is a list
Could
of
you
where they.
find
Of where, how much overtime do we get? No. We have students. This is where they started.
Mhm.
Some have transferred, some have not, some have finished. The students who come and visit for our SASH night and we have every December, right before the holidays, we have what we call the IB potluck dinner. It's always been that way. And now when we have it, we invite the students who just graduated and we award their certificates or their diplomas at that point. We do a nice little thing. And then in the spring, right before graduation, we do what we call SASH night. The booster, the IB parent organization, creates a sash for the kids who've completed all 9 requirements that they wear during graduation and they get to keep. And it's a very nice, and the alumni come back and they actually do the sash. It's a really nice thing. So from those 2 activities, we get to hear from a lot of the students who've returned. And actually, one of our recent graduates was hired here as in a life skills program. Hannah Ballard was the class of 2008, one of our first group. She was our first group, so that was exciting. And so yes, she finished. Several, Dr. Cross's boy, Sean, finished at NYU. He's doing amazing things, and I know the first, Otto Sheck is in grad school.
We probably shouldn't go through the student names.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them there. Sorry.
Okay. I was just curious if we had any numbers on how that affected them in college, if they...
I just have testimonials,
Okay.
and the best way to do that is to come into one of those events and ask them yourself.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes, I had a question about the application process. On page 4 of what I have, there's a list of data and scores and whatnot, and I just wondered who reviews this? Is there a team? What goes into, once the child makes application, what goes into the review of all of this, and how is the decision then ultimately made as to whether or not the student is recommended for the program or encouraged perhaps to apply later?
I collect all the data. I contact I usually and collect all the data and get all the scores, and the lead teachers will help me get more current scores. And we have set up a criteria for the Lexile scores and everything. And then the IB team teachers interview the children, so they have that input. And the IB team then reviews the recommendations. They'll get the spreadsheet, and then the final recommendation comes from Mr. McNairn, where we take the big spreadsheet and we tape it to this wall, and we look at each child. And then some are very obvious; they're right. Some of them, they would be very frustrated, and the ones in the middle, we kind of back and forth about which ones. That's how we.
Other questions? Ms. Fisher?
I'm looking at the 4-year plans you have outlined here. It seems like there's not enough slots to get all the credits in that are required for Maryland graduation, as well as everything that's required for IB. How do they swing that?
Maybe I missed a row.
Well, for
instance, there
instance...
should be 28 slots there, right? 28 slots is... I know, but there are 28 slots, so we're still within the guidelines. The PATH, I should have told you about PATH. PATH is my little symbol for Phys Ed, Arts, Tech, Ed, Health.
That's 4 credits, right?
Right.
So how can they, where you have PATH or elective, how can they take an elective instead of one of the PATH items and get all the PATH items covered?
Because Mr. Akers has offered and to allow us to take a summer course in health and life skills, which is very helpful, especially for the music students. Students can also choose to take physical education or foundation technology in summer school, and sometimes they choose to do that. So when they choose to do that, they're consciously choosing to do that to try to take an elective in the sophomore year or the senior year, trying to open a slot, and they're usually at that point trying to take AP Chemistry. So that's they're highly ambitious. They want it all.
And that's what earlier I mentioned, we try to get creative as much as we can to offer as many opportunities for the students so that they're not limited and have to make those tough choices.
Okay, thank you.
And I would add that if their goal was simply to be an IB graduate and a high school graduate, they can do that within the context of their regular schedule. But when they want to do those extra things, extraordinary things, then we try to find ways to make that possible for them.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bragg?
I know we have only one high school offering the IB program, and maybe Mr. Akers, you could address this. Do we have an AP coordinator in the county, a point person for the AP programs that we have at all of our other high schools as well as North?
Well, as far as coordinating, getting teachers trained and that sort of thing.
Sort of a point person.
Yes, then our
Jessica
Reinhardt, who is our talent and gifted coordinator.
She handles the AP as well.
All of our advanced programs.
Okay. How many of your candidates come from other schools other than North High?
If I had to do a percentage off the top of my head, 30, maybe?
I think we just shared that, I think, in the C&I committee today. I believe it was somewhere in the area of about 18 out of 52. Does that seem right?
Yeah, there were, yes, of the class of 2017, there are 52 students, and 18 of those are out of North High's district. The 2016, there are 43 candidates, 13 of which are outside the school, our district. So there are 18 out of the 37 of the class of the current junior class are outside the district.
And is that a special permission? And they have to provide their own transportation?
No, for high school magnet programs like
that's
that,
right.
we do provide.
We do provide for the magnets. Okay. And is there I think I read in the paper this morning that there was going to be a meeting about all magnet and signature.
Yes, Thursday evening.
And that would include IB as well, I would assume?
Yes. And it will soon include Middle College, if it doesn't already.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Is there any?
I have just one other question, real quick.
Sure.
Do you only have one teacher for each IB course?
Depends on the course. Sometimes, like Miss Jennifer's our IB teacher, but Miss Hoffman is also trained. So
that's for English.
That's for English, and Mrs. Smith is our point person for history. Miss Kaler was also our history teacher, but she took a job being a librarian elsewhere. Mr. Heller and Mr. Ryder also are in social studies department. Mr. Grove, Mr. Warrenfeld's in the math department.
So all of those people have at least one IB course, is that what you're saying?
At least one.
At least one.
Like, Mr. Galvan and Mr. Everts now are sharing duties with IB Spanish, because the more people that we can get involved, it just builds everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having us.
Thank you.
Next, we have board member committee reports. Mrs. Harshman, curriculum.
Well, we just had a curriculum meeting today, and in the meeting we had an update on the IB program, which was very informational and very interesting. It was very similar to this, a little more in depth. Jessica Reinhardt, supervisor for advanced programs, gave that report, and Hope Fuss, supervisor for elementary reading and literacy, presented elementary writing initiative, which talked about the writing skills of the elementary students and what they would be expecting from them this year. And our next meeting will be October 22nd in the board conference room at 12:45, and of course the public is invited.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Mr. Bailey had to leave, but he asked me to pinch hit for him. The Finance Committee has not met since the last meeting. They're scheduled to meet on September 24th at 2:45 p.m. Mrs. Fisher, policy?
Policy Committee met this morning in a double session. We obviously reviewed Section A, which we've already passed this evening. We also discussed a revised policy ACE, service animals in schools, BAA, school board evaluations, IKD, graduation honors, and these will be coming up for second read, I believe, on October 1st at the business meeting. We reviewed and recommended some changes to policies IKA, grading systems for high and middle schools, IGDK, participation on athletic teams' extracurricular activities, IKC, class rankings and grade point average, IKF, graduation requirements, IGDL, student activities, eligibility and regulation, IKDR, graduation honors. Most of these will appear for first read sometime in October. We concluded our discussion and recommendations to BHD, which is Board Member Compensation Expenses and Regulations. This should also be on the October 1st business meeting for first read. Finally, we reviewed proposed changes to DJ purchasing, DJF purchasing procedures, DJG professional service contracts, and reviewed proposed new administrative regulations, DJR, which is a summary of procurement requirements and procedures, and DJGR, professional service contracts. This last set was partially in response to state audit recommendations, and we will be further working with those. At our next meeting, we will also be holding a double session in October, but we'll separate them with one of those tentatively scheduled for October 8th, the others for October 22nd. Those will be confirmed before our next business meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Brightman, Facilities?
Facilities is scheduled to meet on September 24th at Western Heights at 10:15.
Thank you. Mr. Ridenhour?
HR? Excuse me, facilities, yeah. HR is scheduled to meet 8:45 on the same day, 27th.
Thank you.
24th.
Anything regarding MABE that conference planning or
We have a
legislative committees?
conference planning committee meeting on the 24th of this month. So we'll be packing MABE bags and getting things all squared away for that first week in October.
No update other than I'll give a little plug to Maeve. The executive director, Francie Glendenning, will be here at the Chamber Eggs and Issues tomorrow morning, and look forward to introducing her to our community.
And Mr. Grunendijk, anything from student government?
Student government met last Tuesday, I believe, and we discussed graduation policy IKD. Unfortunately, Tech High doesn't have their elections until tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to communicating with their president about that and hopefully the rest of their student government as well. And we were fortunate to have Dr. Hardings and Mr. Ridenhour attend our meeting. That was really good. We also discussed some future plans for moving forward with the year.
Great. And your next meeting is?
Next
not,
month.
not before we meet again, right?
The next meeting is the first or second week of October, but
Okay. Next on the agenda is future agenda items. Nothing to add extensively beyond what board members have already received regarding future agendas. The next meeting, there will be a lot of policies on the agenda, as you just heard from Mrs. Fisher. So That's all there is there. Board member comments, Mr. Grunendijk,
Nothing at this time.
Mrs. Harshman,
Nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Wade,
I have nothing at this time,
Mrs.
thank you.
Fisher.
Just that we had beautiful weather today, and it's good to have that, because I hear we're going to have a rough winter. It's not good for school system.
All those savings.
Not good for Dr. Wilcox.
In the budget.
Mrs. Brighton.
Just a brief, sort of a fun shout out to my teammates from the Muddy Mamas competition on September 7th, and there were 7 of us that did the 3-mile obstacle course and survived. I guess my favorite one was the sort of the Shawshank Redemption. It was the sewer pipe that ended in this big muddy pool at the end. If anyone has seen that movie, they might relate. So I'd like to thank my team members, Cindy Hosapple, Linda Mosier, Jolie Kemp, Chase Poffenberger, Mary Ellen Waltmeyer, and Tia Wright. And we're already building our team for the next year. So it was 1,000 participants showed up and ran the course, and it's all for Girls Inc. So it's a great organization to support our young girls in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Brighton.
Nothing
Mr.
at this time, Dr.
Wright. I will just briefly thank our team as well for hosting the state superintendent yesterday. I was there as a number of board members were. I thought it was very informative. It was a really big crowd. Frankly, surprised me how many people actually showed up. Our team, I thought, answered questions with dignity and professionalism, respecting the people who ask the questions, who have genuine questions and concerns. And I just wanted to thank all those who were involved in that event and congratulate them on a job well done. As I sat and listened last night, there were a few things that popped out at me that I'm just going to, over the course of the next few meetings, just challenge some of our professional staff to think about. Most of the folks up here are educators, and of course all the professional staff who were there last night were educators. And as we've talked often about acronyms, to me it's some of the education language that really struck me last night. I can sort of fake it, I'm not an educator, but I sort of understand what the difference between a standard is and what curriculum and what differentiated instruction means. 4 years ago I didn't. And over the next few months, and we heard it tonight when somebody spoke about student-centered learning. Well, that means something to an educator. I'm not sure it means something to a parent or to a student or to just a member of the community. So I'm going to sort of challenge the staff, and this is not only the senior staff, but our principals and our teachers, that when you're interacting with and trying to explain some of the decisions we make and how we approach what we do, to just think about that. Because I bet most people in this community, if you said professional development, they don't think the same thing that we think in this room. So I'm just going to put that out there, and as we go through more academically based discussions, I'm going to try to challenge some of the staff members. When you say student-driven learning, what do you really mean by that? What does that mean for instruction? So that we can hopefully try to communicate with the people who use our service and who are really our stakeholders. That's one thing that really struck me last night, is with all the professionalism coming from our team in answering questions, sometimes there was just a miss in communication, not because the information wasn't good, but because the language was sort of different between the people who were using it. So that's all I've got other than to say Happy Constitution Day, everybody. We've reached the end of the agenda. I'll declare the meeting adjourned.